welcome here to This Tuesday Live. I am your host. My name is Lucas Simmons, and I'm here every Tuesday at 1 p.m. for a short 10-15-minute video, sometimes 18-minute, depending. And it's typically on whatever is the main topic at hand for the month. And this month, the month of March, we're focusing in on low energy and fatigue. It is a chronic thing that I think so many of us are struggling with. We rely on coffee to get through the day. We rely on being physically active to try to wake ourselves up and get that adrenaline going again. Some of us sometimes feel super stressed, and sometimes the stress response is the only way we'll get a jolt of energy to help us get through the task at hand. So it's not supposed to be that way. So we're talking about ways to support you in returning to normal, natural, healthy energy levels all month long here on Good Food and You. My name is Luca. I'm a holistic nutrition practitioner based on Treaty 7 territory here in the lovely lands at the base of the foothills of the Rocky Mountains, and I'm sure glad you're here with us today. So if you have any questions while this is going on, I encourage you to pop them in the comments below. I'll probably only get to them at the end of the video, but if they're coming in after I've done the video, then I'll be able to answer your questions still. So don't be shy, ask all the questions to help get the clarification you need so that you can feel real good, because that's my bag. I'm going to do what I can so you can feel real good. Okay, today's topic is the curious link between low energy levels, fatigue, and the hormonal link, and why you got to start asking yourself, how's the hormonal piece to all this? Okay, first I want to start with the burden of stress. So I talk about this quite a bit recently. There's 3 types of stress. I like to think of it this way. There is external stress, there is internal stress, and there is emotional stress. External stress is stuff that's going on in the outside world, or things you can't control, or things where you're at the mercy of others. For example, can I make my mortgage payment this month? In this pandemic, will I still have a job in 2 months down the line? How am I going to pay for all the bills at that point? There's also the external stressors of living through the pandemic and being a human when we are not allowed to see others and we don't want to get sick. We don't want to make somebody else sick. We also super miss our friends or family, whatever, for sure. And then you can add on to that, the cost of cell phone bills are increasing or whatever you want to add to that. The internal stress is the piece that I can help with. The internal stress is stuff that's not working well in the body. So for example, if you can't digest well, if you're super burpy farty, if you have undigested food in your stool. More than that, you have hormonal imbalances where hormones are not aligned and things aren't working how they're supposed to, and whatever's tied into hormones. What about blood sugar imbalances? Oh, that's totally part of the internal burden of stress, for sure. When your blood sugars are on a roller coaster all day long, hooey vey, that is hard on the body, and that adds to the internal burden of stress. If you have any type of chronic disease, chronic condition, a diagnosis of sorts, any type, the big hitters like cancer or diabetes, and the maybe smaller things like tendinitis. I mean, the word itis means inflammation. Tendinitis means the inflammation of your tendons. Well, that's inflammatory in nature. Any autoimmune conditions, they're all inflammatory in nature. All of these chronic diseases, things that take a long time to show up, IBS, IBD, Crohn's colitis, all these things, they all add up to that internal burden of stress. And that means stuff that's going on in your body that the biochemistry of it is a little bit off. Then there's emotional stress. And emotional stress, of course, is interpersonal, l'entre-gens, comme on dit en français, like stuff that's going on between you and people. Other people, people in your midst, people outside your midst, emotional relationships with family members in your home, family members outside of your home, past family members, people you're looking after, elder care, younger care, daycare, people care, coworkers, those types of emotional stressors. And you can add to that, if you're living in a traumatic environment, if there's any type of trauma, totally emotional stress. And there's now also linking the intergenerational trauma of generations before you, that the biochemistry of it is carried on down into the generations. So we'll call that emotional stress. So you've got external, internal, and emotional stress, and they all add up to what I'm calling your burden of stress. Just talking about it makes me stressed out. Okay. So if you understand that that is being a human, part of why we need to talk about it, especially when it comes to low energy and fatigue, is that that's how it shows up. Low energy and fatigue is your body sending you a little love note going, I am missing something. I need some help. Or something's not working right. I need you to look into things. It's really a love note from your body saying, sums up. So fatigue and low energy for sure are. But let's talk specifically about how this could be one of those telltale signs your body's sending. And it's because of a hormonal imbalance piece, because there is a hormonal link. Of course there is. There's a hormonal link to everything. Hormones are how your body makes telephone calls to get things done. To be human is a hormonal act. P.S. If you didn't have any hormones, you'd be dead. Hormones are not just girl things. Hormones are girls and boys and all gender things. Like, I don't want to exclude anybody because everybody has hormones. You need hormones for things to happen in the body. You need hormones to digest, to sleep, to get excited about seeing another human being that you want to dance with. You need hormones for mood. Mood regulation is a hormonal activity. Pooping and digesting are hormonal activities. Like, all of this is all, zip it, are all activities that require hormones. So how does that play into fatigue, Luca, or low energy? Well, there's a couple of different ways. So the first one I want to talk about is thyroid related. So your thyroid, tiny little organ you have at the base of your neck. Yes, every gender has one. I think it's funny that, like what? Anyway, sorry. I'm making fun of people, and I suppose I shouldn't, but also, like, when you start to read into some of this stuff, like, it's amazing how much the thyroid does. And to think that you don't have one, you need to get acquainted with it. Your thyroid is really, really keenly involved in energy levels in a couple of different ways. First things first, one of the biggest jobs that your thyroid has is in regulating your metabolism. Metabolism, we tend to think of, well, my metabolism is off if I'm putting on weight, I'm gaining weight. And yeah, sure, that's only one of the few ways that metabolism shows up. But there's a lot of other ways that metabolism is used. So I want you to rethink, what is the definition of metabolism? So metabolism involves the taking in of food, the turning of food into energy, and the utilization of that energy to do things as a human. When that metabolism is no longer there, it's because you're dead. So you need, like, it's just to make a point, like, metabolism is everything. Metabolism is libido. It's tied to digestion. Your metabolism is tied to sleeping. Your metabolism is tied to coming up with a grocery list. Your metabolism is tied to chasing your child around the dining room table because you guys are having a fantastic time in a dance off in the dining room. You know, those types of things. Everything is a metabolic act. Anything that requires the utilization of any type of energy to do a thing, a physical thing, a mental thing, an emotional thing, doesn't matter. All of those things require your thyroid behind the act of metabolism to function well for that to happen. So often when there's low energy or there's fatigue that seems to be quite persistent, it really bears digging a little bit deeper to figure out what's happening with the thyroid. Because the thyroid has an action piece. How did I write it? I wrote it way better than I can say it. Mitochondria. Okay, first things first. Yeah. Oh yeah, I talked about this. Okay, so your mitochondria. Your thyroid has the potential of impacting every single mitochondria, from the function of it to the replication of more, or the making of more mitochondria. All of that is regulated by your thyroid. So your thyroid has, I wrote it so much better. Oh yeah, thyroid is a major regulator of mitochondrial activity. So they're kind of like the boss of your mitochondria, is how you can think of it. So your mitochondria, every cell has one except your red blood cells. And your mitochondria, you have like a few in some cells and like many thousands in other cells, depending on what the function is. But mitochondria, if you remember grade 8 science, is the energy factory of the cell. And every time your body needs to do something, it needs an energy. It needs a battery. It needs a spark plug. It needs some kind of fuel for that to happen, it's the mitochondria who produce the fuel. And your thyroid is in charge of all those mitochondria and calls the shots on how they function and how they replicate and all those things. That is regulated specifically by T3, which is one of the thyroid hormones. So T3 also can stimulate your mitochondria to make more of them. So sometimes when there's a decline in your energy levels, are you having a hard time making more mitochondria? Oh, how's your T3 levels? We need to check to see what's going on with your thyroid. Sometimes. I mean, it can be a bunch of different things, but that is one of the things. So mitochondria, super impacted by the function of your thyroid. The other piece to this could be the adrenals. So your adrenals, this becomes a little bit more complicated. The adrenals, so Kate Deering, who is brilliant, she wrote a book called How to Heal Your Metabolism. Highly recommended. So Kate, who does similar work to what I do in the States and is also a personal trainer, Kate Deering was saying, okay, think of it as your thyroid is your main engine and your backup generator is your adrenals. So you're typically supposed to be using your thyroid as your main source of fuel to do all the mitochondrial work, right? When the thyroid, because of a high burden of stress, is starting to hamper the function of the thyroid, because in that stress response of the body, whether it's external, whether it's internal, whether it's emotional, all of them add up to the exact same biochemistry in the body, and that is the biochemistry of stress. When that stress starts to be too much, part of the body's stress response is in slowing down your thyroid function. So now you're slowing down the production of some of those mitochondria. Yep, possibly. But if your thyroid is being hampered, because that's part of the stress response in the body, to try to make smaller amount of calories go further, because typically the stress response came about due to people running out of food. Your source of fuel was few and far between because there were famines. Yeah. Part of our stress response that we evolved with and our ancestors did 8, 9, 10 generations ago, they evolved with part of the stress response now meant the thyroid would slow down. Well, it would do that so you could utilize a smaller amount of calories to spread over the course of a day. If you slow down metabolism, you don't need as much fuel, and now you can survive on less. Thank you, ancestors. Your brilliance in evolving means I'm here. If you hadn't evolved, there's a chance that I would have died because I wouldn't have had enough fuel and my metabolism would have been a lot higher. But fast forward to 2021, where the stress level is off the charts more than anybody's ever had. We are not living in a time of scarcity. We're actually living in a time of abundance. We have a lot of food at the ready, but we also have an abundance of other things, and we're supposed to be all of the things, do all of the things. Now, as the stress response increases, so slows your thyroid function. Now you go to your backup generator, which is your adrenals, nestled at the bottom of your back on top of your kidneys. They produce a bunch of hormones. Yeah, that is part of your endocrine system. One of the hormones they produce is cortisol because of the stress response. So now you artificially rely on the adrenals to be the engine, because they're just the backup generator. They're there just in case the thyroid isn't working. They're just supposed to be a just in case thing. But as our stress burden increases, so slows down our thyroid function. Now we're relying on the adrenals that are the backup generator that were never meant to be the full-time energy makers or energy prodders. Your thyroid's supposed to be. So when you rely too much on your adrenals, the way that the adrenals do it is they turn on the stress response, because the stress response artificially creates the fuel you need in your system to get through the moment at hand. But it was only ever meant to use in times of stress. We're in high times of stress all of the time right now. So the stress response itself, when you start to rely on the adrenals, and you do so time and again, your stress response, that internal burden of stress, increases itself. It's like a snowball. The more stress you trigger in the body, the more you now rely on the stress response to artificially provide you the fuel you need for your energy to get through that moment. And that hormonal response of cortisol, part of its job is to root around and go find the sugar that's stored in your muscle tissues and your liver to free it so you can use it as a source of fuel. But trip that system too often, and now your thyroid is hampered in the process. And now you're having to rely on the stress response to just get your energy levels. And that, my friend, goes on for too long, and you need to nap. It's not sustainable. It was never meant to be used as your main source of fuel. So in both cases, when we're talking, if the hormone piece at the root of fatigue and low energy levels, if it's a hormonal issue, both thyroid and adrenals require you to get the thyroid back in line. Yeah, you can support adrenals, you can nourish the adrenals, sure. But more than that, you need to bring the thyroid back online. And that requires reducing however much stress you can, external, internal, emotional, reducing those amounts of stress so we could stop turning off the thyroid. Every time the stress response goes, you're turning off the thyroid. So it's 2021, friend. You have a choice. How are you going to reduce this burden of stress that you've got? How can you start reducing the emotional stress? How can you regulate some of that? How can you reduce some of the internal stress? How can you help support the biochemistry of your body? How do you reduce the external burden of stress? How can you create an environment and live in that environment where it's not stressful? Trying to fix what's wrong in a high stress environment. It was Kate Deering this morning again. She's so brilliant, honest to God. She said, if you're trying to heal, what was it? If you're trying to heal your metabolism while you're still living under the same amount of stress, it's like trying to towel yourself off while you're still under the shower. It's not going to work. Like, you can't do it. So where today can you start to reduce your body's burden of stress? Whether it's emotional, internal, or external. If you're not sure where to start, I do actually have a class on thyroid. There's a reason I'm talking about all these things, because I have a 2-hour class coming up on Sunday where we're diving into the thyroid. And we're going to be talking about what are those pieces you can put in place to support that return to center. So you could turn your thyroid back on and go, it's okay, adrenals, you can go have a nap now. And when the thyroid's back online, now you can better regulate your mitochondrial activity. You can better regulate your hormonal function for the thyroid. And now your mitochondria come work how they're supposed to. Oh, I had a whole other spiel that I was going to get into where it can be inflammatory in nature. Maybe that'll be next week. Anyway, it's all the same thing. Yep, we're humans and we made it to here. How are we going to keep making it to tomorrow and 10 years down the line? How do you want to be in 5-10 years? Imagine, picture, start imagining what that looks like. And then if you need some help to lay down the groundwork to get there, I can help. Yeah, you don't have to do it yourself. That adds stress. Reduce the stress, honey. Holler my way. I can answer questions if you want. And we can meet one-on-one if that's also where you're looking for. But let's just answer your questions first. Just send me a private message. In the meantime, go play with your food. If you want to come to the Sunday class, the link to it will be in the comments below. So you can easily join us. It's all online, so you can join us from wherever you are. It's happening at 1 p.m. Mountain Time this coming Sunday, just after the time change in Alberta. So hope you can join us then. In the meantime, I wish you a fun week. We'll speak again. Salut, à bientôt.